The Krillian exodus, the stars looked cold and empty through the viewing window of the command bridge. Admiral Zexthara pressed her six-fingered hand against the transparent metal, watching the distant points of light. Each one represented a world her people would never see again. Behind those stars, somewhere in the darkness, death was coming for them. "Admiral, the engine core temperature is rising again," called out Engineer Veltar from his station. His blue-scaled skin showed patches of stress coloring, deep purple marks that appeared when Krillians faced extreme danger. "We cannot push the drives much longer." Zexthara turned away from the window. The bridge of the flagship star of Krillos had seen better days. Cables hung from damaged ceiling panels. Several control stations flickered with unstable power. The air recycling system made a grinding noise that worried everyone but couldn't be fixed. Not while they were running for their lives. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Maybe 6 hours before the core overheats. 8 if we reduce speed by half." That was not good news. The refugee fleet behind them carried 50,000 souls, all that remained of the once great Krillian Confederation. 200 ships of different sizes moved together through space. Some were military vessels, like her flagship. Others were cargo haulers, passenger liners, and mining ships. Anything that could fly when their homeworld died. The Vorthic swarm had taken everything else. Zex single quotes THARA. Remembered the day the swarm ships first appeared in Krillian space. Black vessels that looked more grown than built, like insects made of metal and hunger. They had swept through the outer colonies first. No communication, no demands, no mercy. They simply arrived, consumed everything living, and moved on to the next world. The Confederation Navy had tried to fight. Their ships were powerful. Their weapons were advanced. Their tactics had won wars against other civilized species for centuries. None of it mattered against the swarm. The Vorthic fought with perfect coordination, as if every ship shared the same mind. They absorbed damage that should have destroyed them. They learned from each battle and adapted. World after world fell. System after system went dark. The proud Krillian fleet, once 3,000 ships strong, was reduced to these few survivors. "Admiral," the communications officer spoke up. "We're receiving distress signals from the Gentle Current and the Mountain Song. Both ships report critical system failures." Zexthara closed her eyes for a moment. The Gentle Current was a passenger liner carrying 8,000 civilians. The Mountain Song was a research vessel with some of their best scientists aboard. They couldn't lose either ship. "Send repair teams from the Iron Will and the Star Dancer," she ordered. "Tell them to transfer essential personnel if the ships can't be saved." "Yes, Admiral." She walked to the tactical display in the center of the bridge. The holographic map showed their fleet's position and course. They were 3 days out from the nearest star system, traveling through empty space between galaxies. It was supposed to be safe here. The Vorthic had never followed prey this far from inhabited systems before, but something felt wrong. Sensor Officer Crixna. "Run another deep scan behind us," Zexthara said. The young Krillian's hands moved quickly over her controls. Her large, dark eyes reflected the scanner displays as data flowed across the screens. After a few minutes, her skin began showing stress marks. "Admiral, I'm detecting movement. Very faint, but definitely there. Multiple contacts, approximately 47 hours behind us." The bridge went quiet. Even the damaged air recycling system seemed to stop its grinding for a moment. "How many?" Zexthara asked, though she feared the answer. "Difficult to determine at this range. At least 50 ships. Maybe more. They're moving fast, much faster than we can travel with our damaged engines." 50 ships. The remaining Krillian fleet had 37 vessels capable of fighting. The rest were civilian ships with no weapons. Even if all their military ships were in perfect condition, 50 Vorthik ships would be a difficult battle. With their current damage and low ammunition, it would be a massacre. Time until they reach us? She asked. If they maintain current speed, and we continue at reduced power, 16 hours. 16 hours. Zexthara felt the weight of 50,000 lives pressing down on her shoulders. These people had trusted her to lead them to safety. Parents with children. Scientists carrying the knowledge of their civilization. Artists who remembered the songs of their lost homeworld. All looking to her for salvation she couldn't provide. Options? She asked her staff. We could scatter the fleet, suggested Commander Rexpol, her tactical officer. Some ships might escape if we split up. The civilian ships can't survive alone, Beltar pointed out. They need our protection and support. We could try to fight them here, Rexpol continued. Use the asteroid field near the edge of this system as cover. Zexthara studied the tactical display. The asteroid field was 3 hours away at their current speed. It would provide some protection, but not nearly enough. The Vorthik had destroyed fleets hiding in asteroid fields before. What about the emergency distress beacon? Asked the communications officer. We could activate it and hope someone responds. Who? Rexpol's scales darkened with despair. Every civilization we know of is either dead or running like us. There's no one left to answer. Zexthara stared at the tactical display, watching the small icons representing their fleet. Such a tiny cluster of lights in the vast darkness of space. The last survivors of a species that had once ruled dozens of star systems. Continue course toward the asteroid field, she decided. Begin preparations for our last stand. All civilian ships should transfer non-essential personnel to the most protected vessels. Military ships will form a defensive screen. Admiral, Krixna called out suddenly. The Vorthik fleet is accelerating. They'll reach us in 12 hours, not 16. 12 hours. Zexthara felt her own stress marks appearing on her skin. In 12 hours, the Vorthik would fall upon them like predators on wounded prey. The last chapter of Krillian history would end in this cold, empty space between the stars. Continue monitoring their approach, she ordered, and activate the emergency beacon. Even if no one can reach us in time, perhaps someone will find our final message and know what happened here. The bridge crew worked in grim silence, preparing for an impossible battle. Outside the viewing window, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the small tragedy about to unfold in their midst. Somewhere behind them, death approached on dark wings, patient and relentless as always. The unlikely saviors. 10 hours had passed since Admiral Zexthara gave the order to prepare for their final battle. The Krillian refugee fleet had reached the asteroid field, but their hopes of finding good defensive positions had been crushed. The asteroids were too small and too scattered to provide meaningful cover. Their damaged ships struggled to maneuver between the floating rocks. Vorthik scouts have entered scanner range, reported Sensor Officer Krixna. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she worked her controls. First wave consists of 8 ships. Main fleet will arrive in 2 hours. Zexthara stood before the tactical display, watching the red dots that represent approaching death. The Vorthik scouts were fast attack ships, designed to harass and weaken targets before the main force arrived. Even these scouts outnumbered her available fighters. All civilian ships move to the center of the formation, she ordered. Military vessels take defensive positions. Prepare to engage the scouts. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, but Zexthara could see the fear in their movements. They all knew this was the end. The emergency distress beacon had been broadcasting for hours, but no response had come. They were alone in the darkness, facing an enemy that had already destroyed their entire civilization. Admiral, the scouts are beginning their attack run, Commander Rexpol announced. They're targeting the Mountain Song. The research vessel was one of their most valuable ships, carrying scientists and cultural archives. It had no weapons and weak shields. The Vorthik always seemed to know which targets would hurt the most. Iron Will and Star Dancer, intercept those scouts, Zexthara ordered. Protect the Mountain Song at all costs. On the tactical display, she watched her 2 remaining cruisers change course toward the attacking Vorthik. The enemy scouts moved like living things, flowing around asteroids with impossible grace. Their ships looked wrong, all curves and organic lines, as if they had been grown rather than built. The first exchange of weapons fire lit up the darkness. Blue energy beams from Krillian ships met the strange green plasma of Vorthik weapons. The Iron Will took a direct hit to its port side, and Zexthara saw atmosphere venting from the breach. Iron Will reports damage to their shield generators. The communications officer called out. Tell them to fall back, Zexthara ordered. But she knew it was useless. There was nowhere to retreat to. That was when the impossible happened. Admiral! Crixen's voice rose with excitement and confusion. New contacts emerging from hyperspace. 12 ships, unknown configuration. Zexthara spun to look at the sensor display. 12 new dots had appeared on the screen, positioned between her fleet and the attacking Vorthik scouts. But these weren't more enemies. The computer was marking them as unknown, not hostile. What species are they? She demanded. Unknown, Admiral. Their ship designs don't match anything in our database. They're broadcasting on standard communication frequencies. Before Zexthara could respond, a voice filled the bridge. It was strange, melodic but firm, speaking in accented but understandable Krillian. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Colonial Defense Force ship Defiance. We received your distress signal. Are you in need of assistance? The bridge fell silent. Terran? No one had ever heard of a species called Terrans. Zexthara looked at her crew, seeing the same confusion reflected in their faces. This is Admiral Zexthara of the Krillian Confederation, she replied carefully. We are under attack by hostile forces. Our fleet is carrying civilian refugees. Copy that, Admiral. We see the attacking vessels. Please maintain your current position while we deal with the immediate threat. Zexthara felt a flash of anger. Captain Chun, you don't understand. Those are Vorthik ships. They've destroyed our entire civilization. 8 scout ships might not seem like much, but... Understood, Admiral. The human captain interrupted calmly. We've got this. Defiance to all ships. Engage hostile scouts. Protect the refugee fleet. On the tactical display, the 12 unknown ships, these Terran vessels, moved toward the Vorthik scouts. Their ships looked primitive compared to Krillian or Vorthik technology. Angular and blocky, like metal boxes with engines attached. But they moved with startling coordination, spreading into attack formation with military precision. Admiral, the Terran ships are engaging the scouts, Rexpol reported with disbelief in his voice. Zexthara watched in amazement as the human ships opened fire. Their weapons were kinetic, actual projectiles rather than energy beams. It seemed like ancient technology, but the projectiles moved incredibly fast and hit with devastating accuracy. The first Vorthak scout took 3 hits to its central hull and exploded in a ball of green fire. The second scout tried to evade, but 2 human ships had predicted its movement. They fired from opposite directions, catching the alien vessel in a deadly crossfire. This is impossible, breathed Engineer Veltar. Those ships are half the size of Vorthik scouts. Their weapons look primitive. How are they winning? Zexthara had no answer. She watched as the human fleet systematically destroyed the Vorthik scouts with tactics she'd never seen before. They used the asteroid field like a three-dimensional chessboard, bouncing projectiles off rocks to hit targets from unexpected angles. When one human ship was damaged, two others immediately moved to protect it while it retreated down in less than 20 minutes. All 8 Vortex scouts were destroyed. The human ships regrouped near the Krillian fleet, showing minimal damage despite facing enemies that had terrorized the galaxy. "This is Captain Chun again," the voice returned. "Immediate threat neutralized. Admiral, we show a larger force approaching your position. We count approximately 50 hostile vessels. Recommend we discuss defensive strategy." 50 ships. These humans had just destroyed 8 Vortex scouts, and now they were talking about fighting 50 more as if it were a reasonable possibility. "Captain Chun," Zexthora said slowly, "you don't understand what you're facing. The Vortex swarm has destroyed dozens of civilizations. 50 of their ships could destroy 100 of ours. You should retreat while you still can." There was a pause before the human captain replied. When she spoke again, Zexthara detected something in her voice that she recognized. The sound of someone who had faced impossible odds before and refused to back down. "Admiral, we appreciate the warning, but we didn't come all this way just to run when things got difficult. Besides, 50 ships doesn't sound too bad. We faced worse odds." "Worse odds?" Zexthara could barely believe what she was hearing. "What kind of species are you?" "We're human," Captain Chen replied simply. "We're from a planet called Earth, and we have a rule about leaving people behind when they need help. So if you're willing to work with us, we'd like to discuss how we're going to get your people out of here safely." Zexthara looked around her bridge. Her crew stared back at her with expressions of hope she hadn't seen in months. These humans, these unknown Terrans, had just offered to stand between 50,000 refugees and the most dangerous force in the galaxy. It was insane. It was impossible. But as she watched the small, blocky human ships maintaining formation around her fleet, Admiral Zexthara realized that sometimes insane and impossible were the only options left. "Captain Chun," she said, "we accept your assistance. What do you need from us?" Impossible tactics. The main Vorthok fleet emerged from hyperspace like a dark storm breaking over the asteroid field. 50 ships materialized in perfect formation, their organic hulls gleaming with a wet, living sheen that made them look more like sea creatures than spacecraft. Each vessel was massive. The smallest was twice the size of Admiral Zexthara's flagship. "By the sacred stars," whispered Commander Rexball, as he watched the enemy fleet spread across the tactical display. "I've never seen so many of them in one place." Zexthara felt the familiar chill of absolute terror, but something was different this time. The 12 human ships had positioned themselves in a defensive screen between the refugees and the approaching swarm. Their formation looked wrong by every tactical manual she'd ever studied. But there was something about their positioning that felt intentional. "Captain Chun," she called over the communication link. "The main fleet has arrived. Recommend immediate retreat to hyperspace." "Negative, Admiral," came the calm reply. "We're right where we want to be. All Terran ships, begin Pattern Delta 7. Let's show these bugs how humans fight." On the tactical display, the human ships began moving in a way that defied military logic. Instead of forming a defensive wall or retreating to better positions, they scattered into the asteroid field like leaves in a storm. But as Zexthara watched more closely, she realized their movements weren't random at all. "They're using the asteroids as cover," observed Sensor Officer Krixna. "But that's impossible. The rocks are moving too fast, and the spaces between them are too small for ship navigation." The Vorthok fleet began its attack. Streams of green plasma lanced out from their weapons, searching for targets among the floating rocks. But the human ships seemed to dance between the deadly beams, using their smaller size and incredible maneuverability to avoid destruction. Then the humans began firing back. And Zexthara saw something that made her question everything she knew about space combat. The human ship, Ranger, was being pursued by a Vorthic cruiser through a cluster of asteroids. Instead of running or turning to fight, the human vessel fired its kinetic weapons at a large asteroid directly ahead of its pursuer. The projectiles shattered the rock, sending fragments flying in all directions. The Vorthic ship, traveling too fast to avoid the debris field, slammed into dozens of sharp stone pieces. Its organic armor cracked and atmosphere vented from multiple breaches. Did they just use an asteroid as a weapon? Engineer Veltar asked in amazement, but the humans weren't finished. As the damaged Vorthic cruiser tried to retreat, two other human ships appeared from behind neighboring asteroids. They had been waiting in ambush, using the rock formations to hide their heat signatures. Their concentrated fire crippled the cruiser's engines, leaving it drifting helplessly. Star Dancer to Admiral Zexthara, came a transmission from one of her own ships. Are we seeing this correctly? The humans are winning? Zexthara could hardly believe it herself, but the tactical display didn't lie. 3 Vorthic ships were already destroyed or disabled, while the human fleet remained intact. But how was it possible? Captain Chun, she called out, your tactics are unlike anything in our military databases. How are you accomplishing this? We're improvising, Admiral, Chun replied, and Zexthara could hear weapon fire in the background. Humans are pretty good at making things up as we go along. Plus, we've been fighting in asteroid fields since before we had faster-than-light travel. It's familiar territory. As if to demonstrate her point, the human destroyer Courage executed a maneuver that should have been suicidal. A massive Vorthic dreadnought was bearing down on it, weapons charging for a killing shot. Instead of retreating, the Courage accelerated directly toward the enemy ship. At the last possible second, it fired its maneuvering thrusters and spun sideways, passing under the dreadnought's belly while firing its full weapons load into the larger ship's unarmored underside. The Vorthic dreadnought shuddered as explosions rippled along its hull, but it was far from destroyed. It turned to pursue the Courage, which was now retreating toward a cluster of large asteroids. That human ship is damaged, Rexpol reported. Its port engine is failing. It won't be able to outrun the dreadnought. But once again, the humans surprised them. Instead of trying to escape, the Courage flew directly between 2 massive asteroids, barely fitting through the gap. The much larger Vorthic dreadnought couldn't follow through such a narrow space, but it positioned itself at the exit point, waiting for the human ship to emerge. It was then that Zexthara understood the true brilliance of human tactics. The Courage hadn't been retreating. It had been leading the dreadnought into a trap. As the Vorthic ship waited at the asteroid gap, 3 other human vessels emerged from hiding spots among the rocks. They had surrounded the enemy ship while it was focused on a single target. The concentrated fire from 4 human ships overwhelmed the dreadnought's defenses. Its organic armor bubbled and cracked under the kinetic bombardment. Secondary explosions began tearing through its hull as internal systems failed. Within minutes, the massive ship that could have destroyed half the Krillian fleet was a drifting wreck. Impossible, breathed Veltar. A dreadnought-class vessel destroyed by 4 smaller ships. The mathematics don't support it. Maybe their mathematics are different from ours, Zexthara replied quietly. The battle continued for another hour, but the outcome became increasingly clear. The Vorthic fleet, accustomed to crushing civilized opponents through overwhelming force, found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow established patterns. Every time they adapted to human tactics, the humans changed their approach. When the Vorthic ships bunched together for mutual support, human vessels would appear from unexpected directions, firing at extreme range before disappearing back into the asteroid field. When the aliens tried to spread out to cover more area, The humans would concentrate their fire on isolated targets, destroying them before help could arrive. The most shocking moment came when the human ship, Determination, suffered critical damage to its main engines. Pursued by two Vorthok cruisers, it should have been an easy kill. Instead, Captain Torres of the Determination did something no sane being would attempt. He rammed his crippled ship directly into one of the pursuing vessels. ZEX. Dara watched in horror as the human ship struck the Vorthok cruiser at full velocity. The impact should have destroyed both vessels instantly. But somehow, impossibly, the Determination survived. Its reinforced bow section punched through the organic hull of the enemy ship like a spear. The Vorthok cruiser exploded from internal damage, while the human ship, though heavily damaged, remained functional. Determination to Fleet Command, came a cheerful voice over the communication system. We're still in the fight. Just need a few minutes to patch some holes. They're insane, Rexpol muttered. Absolutely insane. No, Zexthara corrected, watching as the human fleet regrouped for another attack. There's something else entirely. As the battle raged on, she began to understand what made these humans so formidable. It wasn't just their unconventional tactics or their willingness to take enormous risks. It was their refusal to accept defeat, even when facing impossible odds. Every time they were cornered, they found a new way to fight back. Every time they were outnumbered, they turned their disadvantages into weapons. By the time the last Vorthok ship limped away into hyperspace, 37 enemy vessels had been destroyed or disabled. The human fleet had taken damage, but not a single ship had been lost. They had accomplished something no other species in the galaxy had managed. They had defeated a major Vorthok force in open combat. Admiral, Captain Chun's voice came over the communication link. The immediate area is secure, but we need to discuss getting your people somewhere safer. That wasn't their main fleet, just a hunting pack. The real swarm is probably not far behind. The impossible escape. Long-range sensors are detecting massive hyperspace disturbances, reported Krixna, her voice tight with controlled fear. The main Vorthok swarm is approximately 6 hours out. I count at least 300 ships. The temporary relief Admiral Zexthara had felt after the human victory evaporated instantly. 300 Vorthok ships. Even these incredible humans couldn't fight odds like that. The brief hope that her people might survive began to fade again. Captain Chun, she called urgently, you need to retreat immediately. The main swarm is coming, and we cannot ask you to face those numbers. Understood, Admiral, came the calm reply. But we're not leaving your people behind. All Terran ships, begin Operation Lighthouse immediately. Zexthara had no idea what Operation Lighthouse meant, but she was about to learn just how far humans were willing to go to save strangers. Admiral, Captain Chun's voice continued. We need your fleet to prepare for emergency hyperspace jump. All ships, maximum range, any direction that takes you away from here. Captain, that's impossible. Engineer Veltar interrupted on the communication channel. Half our ships have damaged hyperspace drives. The others are running on emergency power. We might get 3 or 4 ships to safety, but the rest... That's where we come in, Chun replied. We're going to transfer power cores, shield generators, and technical crews to your ships. It's going to be dangerous, but it's the only way to get everyone out of here. Zexthara felt her heart skip a beat. Captain, you're talking about gunning your own ships to repair ours. That would leave you defenseless. Not defenseless. Admiral, just creative. Trust us. We've done this kind of thing before. Over the next hour, Zexthara watched something that challenged everything she thought she knew about military doctrine. The human ships began docking with damaged Krillian vessels, and their crews swarmed over the broken systems like organized chaos. They worked with incredible speed and efficiency. but also with a complete disregard for standard safety protocols. Human engineers crawled through damaged sections that were still venting atmosphere, somehow sealing breaches with tools and materials they seemed to carry with them. They transferred power cores from their own ships, connecting alien technology with improvised adapters that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. "This is Engineer Martinez from the Defiance," came a voice over the communication link. "I'm looking at your hyperspace motivator on the gentle current. The primary coils are fried, but I think I can reroute power through the secondary systems if we boost the input by about 40%. That will overload the entire assembly," protested the Krillian engineer. "It's not designed to handle that much power." "That's okay," Martinez replied cheerfully. "We'll reinforce it with some spare plating from our cargo hold. It won't be pretty, but it should hold together long enough for one jump." On the mountain song, a team of human technicians was installing a complete shield generator array salvaged from their own ship. They worked in the vacuum of space, using magnetic boots and safety lines, moving heavy equipment through airlocks with remarkable coordination. "How are they doing this so quickly?" asked Commander Rexpol as he watched the repair operations on the tactical display. "They're not following procedure," observed Veltar with something like awe in his voice. "They're just making it up. But it's working." The most remarkable scene was taking place aboard Zexthar's own flagship. Captain Chun had personally led a boarding party to help repair the Star of Krillis' navigation systems. The human captain was currently elbow-deep in the primary computer core, rewiring circuits with tools that looked like they had been improvised from spare parts. "The problem is here," Chun explained to the Krillian navigation officer. "Your quantum processors are running too hot because the cooling system is damaged. But if we reroute power through these secondary pathways and install these heat sinks from our ship's computer system..." "Captain, those heat sinks aren't designed for our technology," the officer protested. "The connection protocols are completely different." Chun grinned, an expression that Zexthar was beginning to recognize as distinctly human. "That's what universal adapters are for. Plus a little creative rewiring." She pulled out a device that looked like it had been built from random electronic components and began connecting it between the two incompatible systems. Sparks flew from the connections, but somehow the improvised solution held together. "There," Chun said with satisfaction. "Your navigation computer should be running at about 80% efficiency. Not perfect, but good enough to calculate a hyperspace jump." As the repairs continued, Zexthar began to realize the true scope of what the humans were doing. They weren't just sharing spare parts. They were systematically stripping their own ships to save the Krillian fleet. Power cores, shield generators, computer systems, even crew members were being transferred to ensure the refugee ships could escape. "Captain," she called out as Chun finished working on the navigation system, "you're sacrificing your own ship's capabilities to save us. What happens when the main swarm arrives?" Chun wiped grease from her hands with a cloth and looked at Zexthar with those strange, determined eyes that seemed to be a human characteristic. "Admiral, we've got a plan for that too. But first, let's make sure your people are ready to jump." The repairs took 4 hours, with human and Krillian crews working side by side to accomplish the impossible. Ships that had been limping along on emergency power were now running at near full capacity. Vessels with catastrophic damage had been patched and reinforced with human engineering that defied CONVENTIONL logic, but somehow worked. "All ships report ready for hyperspace jump," announced the communications officer. But even as he spoke, alarms began sounding throughout the fleet. Crixin's voice rose with panic as she read her sensors. "The main swarm has arrived. 312 ships emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system." On the tactical display, a wall of red dots appeared, moving toward them with terrifying purpose. The main Vortex swarm was unlike anything Zexthara had seen before. Massive hive ships, surrounded by clouds of smaller vessels, all moving in perfect coordination like a single organism. All civilian ships begin immediate hyperspace jump. Chun ordered. Military escort vessels, prepare to cover the evacuation. But there was a problem. The gentle current, carrying 8,000 refugees, was having trouble with its patched hyperspace drive. The improvised repairs were holding, but the ship needed more time to charge its jump capacitors. Gentle current reports 30 more seconds until ready. Called out Rex single quotes Paul.30 seconds. Zexthara watched the approaching swarm and knew they didn't have 30 seconds. The first wave of Vorthak attack ships would reach them in less than 20. That was when the humans did something that would haunt her dreams and inspire her people for generations to come. All Terran ships. Captain Chun's voice rang out over the communication system. Assume defensive formation around the gentle current. We hold the line until she jumps. 12 human ships, already weakened by giving away their essential systems, positioned themselves directly between the massive Vorthak swarm and the defenseless refugee ship. It was a gesture so suicidal, so selflessly brave, that for a moment Zexthara couldn't find words to respond. Captain, you can't, she finally managed. There are too many of them. Admiral, Chen replied, and there was something in her voice, a warmth and determination that Zexthara would remember for the rest of her life. This is what humans do. We don't leave people behind. The first Vorthak ships opened fire just as the gentle current disappeared into hyperspace. The remaining human fleet, outnumbered 30-1, opened fire on the approaching swarm. New alliances, the impossible happened again. As the massive Vortex swarm closed in on the 12 remaining human ships. Captain Chun's voice cut through the chaos with an order that made no sense to anyone except her crew. All ships, execute Prometheus Protocol. Target the binary star system. Coordinate 77 Alpha. Admiral Zexthara looked at her tactical display in confusion. Chen was talking about the twin stars at the center of the system. Two massive, unstable suns locked in a dangerous orbital dance. But they were nowhere near those stars. What could the humans possibly accomplish by targeting them from this distance? Captain, what are you doing? She called out urgently. Something we really hope works, Chen replied. All ships, fire quantum torpedoes on my mark. Targeting the smaller star's magnetic containment field. Quantum torpedoes. Zexthara had heard of such weapons, but had never seen them used. They were theoretical devices that could disrupt the fundamental forces holding matter together. Most civilizations considered them too dangerous to deploy, but the humans, it seemed, had no such reservations. Mark! Chun shouted. 12 ships, spread across thousands of kilometers, fired simultaneously at a target millions of kilometers away. Their torpedoes streaked through space, leaving trails of twisted spacetime in their wake. The weapons were so precise that they all arrived at the target within nanoseconds of each other. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The Vorthak swarm continued its advance, now only minutes away from overwhelming the human fleet. Then the smaller of the two stars began to flicker. By the sacred void, whispered Engineer Veltar, watching his instruments. They've destabilized the stellar magnetic field. The star is going to collapse. What followed was a demonstration of cosmic violence that few beings had ever witnessed. The smaller star, its internal forces suddenly disrupted, began imploding at an incredible rate. But because it was locked in orbit with its larger companion, the gravitational effects were catastrophic. Massive stellar material began streaming between the two suns as their gravitational dance became a death spiral. Solar flares erupted from both stars, sending waves of radiation and charged particles throughout the system. Most importantly, the gravitational distortions began affecting hyperspace in the region, making faster-than-light travel impossible. The Vorthic swarm found itself trapped in normal space, unable to pursue the escaped refugee fleet or summon reinforcements. But they were still 300 ships against 12, and they were close enough to attack. "All ships, Phase 2, Chan ordered calmly. "Remember, we just need to buy time for the gravitational wave to build." What followed was the most impossible battle Zexthara had ever witnessed. The human ships, outnumbered 25 to 1, began dancing through the Vorthic fleet like predators among prey. They used the stellar radiation and gravitational distortions as weapons, leading enemy ships into solar flare paths and magnetic field disruptions. The Defiance itself took on a Vorthic battleship 3 times its size, using the gravitational field of a nearby moon to slingshot around the enemy vessel while firing at point-blank range. The Ranger led an entire squadron of enemy fighters into a radiation storm, where their organic hulls began breaking down under the intense energy bombardment. But the most incredible sight was the human destroyer, Determination, the same ship that had survived ramming a Vorthic cruiser earlier. With its front section still crumpled from the previous impact, it somehow managed to ram 2 more enemy ships, using the wreckage of the first as an improvised weapon. "How are they still fighting?" Rexpol asked in amazement. "They should all be dead by now." "They're buying time," Zexthara realized, understanding the human plan at last. "They're waiting for the stellar collapse to reach critical mass." As if responding to her words, the gravitational distortions in the system suddenly intensified. The 2 stars, now locked in a final spiral toward mutual destruction, began generating massive waves of twisted spacetime. These waves propagated outward at the speed of light, warping reality itself. Any ship caught in the expanding field of gravitational chaos would be torn apart by tidal forces. But the waves were predictable. They followed the laws of physics with mathematical precision. And the humans, with their impossible ability to calculate risks and benefits in real time, had positioned themselves perfectly. "All ships, emergency jump," Chan ordered. "Execute on my mark." "Mark!" The 12 human ships vanished into hyperspace just seconds before the gravitational wave reached their position. The Vorthic swarm, caught completely off guard by the cosmic catastrophe, had no time to escape. 300 ships were torn apart by forces that made their weapons seem like toys. For several minutes, Zexthara could only stare at her instruments in shock. The entire enemy fleet, the force that had been moments away from destroying her people, had been eliminated by stellar engineering on an impossible scale. "This is Captain Chung," came the familiar voice over the communication system. "Sorry about the delay, Admiral. Had to make sure the gravitational barrier was properly established. The Vorthic won't be following anyone through this system for quite some time, Captain." Zexthara struggled to find words. "You destroyed an entire star system to save us." "Only temporarily," Chen replied with that characteristic human confidence. "The stars will stabilize in a few years. The gravitational effects will fade, but it should buy your people time to find a new home." Over the following days, as the combined fleet traveled toward a distant, habitable system that the humans had identified, Zexthara learned more about these remarkable beings called humans. They came from a small planet called Earth, located in a region of space that most galactic civilizations considered too remote and dangerous to explore. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, making them newcomers to galactic civilization. But in that short time, they had established colonies throughout their local region and developed a reputation for taking in refugees from other species conflicts. "We've been the underdog before," Captain Chun explained during one of their conversations. Earth was invaded twice in our early spacefaring years. Both times, other species helped us survive. We learned that sometimes the smallest gesture of kindness can change everything. The human ships escorted the Krillian refugees to a beautiful world they called New Haven, a planet with vast oceans and fertile continents, perfect for rebuilding their civilization. But what impressed the Zexthar most was that the humans asked for nothing in return. No territorial concessions, no trade agreements, no political alliances. "This is what we do," Chum said simply when Zexthara tried to offer compensation. "Besides, having the Krillians as neighbors will make this region of space safer for everyone." As the refugee ships established orbit around their new homeworld, Zexthara sent an encrypted message to every surviving civilization she could contact. The message was simple but urgent. "We have found unexpected allies. They call themselves humans, and they are extraordinary. They saved 50,000 of our people from certain death, asking nothing in return. They defeated the Vorthik through tactics and courage, unlike anything we have ever seen. They turned disadvantages into weapons and impossibilities into victories." She paused in her recording, watching through her viewing port as human and Krillian crews worked together to establish the first settlements on New Haven. Children of both species played together in the cargo bays, learning each other's languages and sharing games. "If the Vorthik swarm represents the worst that the galaxy can produce," she continued, "then humanity may represent its best hope. They are brave beyond reason, clever beyond measure, and kind beyond expectation. I recommend immediate contact and alliance with the Terran Colonial Defense Force. We are no longer alone in this fight." As her message transmitted across the galaxy, carrying news of hope to countless desperate civilizations, Admiral Zexthara reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought humans into their lives. The Krillian Confederation was gone, but its people would survive and rebuild. And somewhere among the stars, other refugee fleets would receive that message and know that help might be coming. The humans had a saying. Captain Chun had told her, "No one fights alone." As Zexthara watched the first human and Krillian children take their first steps on New Haven soil together, she finally understood what those words truly meant. The galaxy had found its guardians. They were called humans, and they were just getting started.